You're good.
Ready to go?
Yep.
All right, this is a regularly scheduled meeting, Government Operations Committee. It's September 18th at 5:45, and Councilor Trumbull, the other members of the committee, I'm gonna know this by the time this year ends. Hey, Councilor Yakubak is on the committee.
Nope.
Councilor Pelletier is, and Councilor Sprague and Councilor Leonard.
There you go.
So we got four of us, and the first item, and we also have the Assistant City Manager, Courtney O'Donnell. First time is a donation of 6 trees for intersection of Center and Back Street.
Yes, we're gonna welcome Parks, Public Works Director Aaron Hootery to the table. Sorry, I think trees and parks that just came out.
So thanks for having me here. It's nice to be able to deliver good news. I'm here tonight to request approval to accept a donation of 6 trees for right up at the top of the hill here from Bangor Beautiful. They are a tax exempt organization with a mission of making our community more beautiful, a more beautiful place to live. So this, in addition to making the community more beautiful, also stretches our botanical budget a bit. So you know what I mean? These are Center Street in particular is a focus for us because a lot of trees have been removed over the years and not replaced. So we're starting a plan to replenish those. But this is a great start that won't cost us really anything. It's you know, we'll oversee it, make sure that we don't have any issues with the infrastructure underneath the ground. But they're Bangor Beautiful will bring in the trees, we'll bring in the tree diapers that will keep the trees moist and give them a chance to grow. And they're bringing in volunteers to do the work. So this really is as far as I'm concerned, is a no-brainer to accept a $875 cash value of the donation, plus at least another couple $100 in labor. I do have Greg Edwards, the treasurer and secretary of Bangor Beautiful. If you had any questions, but I think this kind of speaks for itself tonight.
Any questions on this? I think it's great. I mean, that's, now that intersection is done, it'd be good to get those trees and is there a motion to accept the donation?
Move staff recommendation.
A second,
Second.
it's approved, and please thank the organization, Greg. Thank you very much. Okay, next item, is now we're giving away stuff. Police cruiser to the UTC.
Let me jump right in.
Yep.
Oh, that's right, you oversee that.
Yeah, I oversee the fleet, but I'm speaking on behalf of Chief Hathaway and myself. United Technology Center is a career and technical school, working with high school students, high school level students. Honestly, right now, I have a UTC intern working with us at Public Works. They have equipment experience, they have training, and has jumped right in with a great deal of energy and enthusiasm into our program. I'm very happy to have him. So happy to be sitting here today talking about an opportunity to donate a used police cruiser. This police cruiser is retired. We can sell it. We could get probably around $5,000 for it. That's been the going price for these. They do have a lot of hours on them. They're not always really high in miles, 170,000 maybe. I don't know exactly what this one has, but they don't bring a lot of money, but this can be used at UTC. Number one, the automotive technology program can work on it. The composite fabrication can deal with the rust, the surface rust issues that it has, and then it can be turned over to the law enforcement program for actual training there. So this would really benefit them greatly. And I just want to throw out there that graduates of all 3 programs could be helpful to the city of Bangor. There's no guarantees. My current intern says he'd love to have a career at Public Works, and I would love to see something like that. But this really is a benefit to them as well as to the city. So hopefully this is something that you can see your way clear to approve. I do have Kyle Smart, the UTC Work Experience Coordinator, former law enforcement instructor here. If you have any questions, or if you wanted to make a statement.
If you don't mind, I used to teach
Come up to
the,
the table so you can hear everyone.
I used to teach the law enforcement program at the school. I did that for 6 years before I moved in my
current position, as work experience coordinator. And I will tell you, having an actual police cruiser to do the police training with is very important. A great deal of our students will move on to either Hudson or the community college next door. We have quite a few students that go to the community college. They do the same type of training over there, so it's a good idea for the students. They get that training before they get over there. They've already got a leg up on some of the other candidates. I did have one of our students that did an internship last year at Bangor PD. He's waiting to be old enough to go to the academy, so maybe that'll work out for you folks. But beyond that, when we get something like this, that vehicle will be used, as Aaron said, throughout the school. It'll get regular service from our automotive program. They'll get a chance to work on it. The composite program, they can keep it up. The current cruiser that we have right now is a 2011 Crown Victoria. You folks remember those? The one that we currently have, every time you close the door, the rust will fall up from below it. So we're retiring that one preemptively. But if you guys can see fit to donate the vehicle to us, it'd be a huge help for us.
I sit on just one more piece. I sit on the craft advisory committee there for the construction program, essentially. And this is just a great educational organization. It really is a diamond for the city of Bangor. So I can't speak highly enough about it from the being over there for the traffic signal school that is just hosted there, but being able to do the school and see all the programs that they offer, and now actually working with instructors and working with Mr. Smart, it's a huge benefit to our city.
Council Spring.
I'd add to Aaron's comment. I think UTC is doing remarkable work. And you're bringing in people from all over, predominantly the county, I think. So for Frankfurt, which is the only town outside of the county. So I think it gets a lot of county support, gets a lot of school department support, but it's doing a wonderful job. And having toured that myself, I would suggest maybe that the council take a field trip sometime as a group. And go and talk with the director and some of the staff and just sit down and see what that operation is. But I think it's very important to the city, and it's certainly when we're talking about we talked about a housing plan, and working with educational institutions on workforce development. That certainly is a place where that's occurring and very much needed. And I think it certainly applies to our police department as well. So I'd move staff recommendation.
Second. All right, if there's no objection, we will donate the vehicle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
both. There is a tour.
Stop by anytime, happy to give you a tour.
Okay. Next item is a public transportation agency safety plan for the community collector.
Yes, this is a yearly plan. And I'm gonna ask Lori Lynn Scott, bus superintendent, to join us. She doesn't always get a moment in the spotlight, so she's here. She gets to come to the table. She works hard on this plan every year. We do have a new chief safety officer from the last time we were at the table. But other than that, I'll let Lori provide a little bit of an overview of this plan.
So the PTAS plan, we're all required to write one, everybody that has a transit system. And because we're a small agency, we get to kind of surpass some of the larger items that we need to have in there. This will go to, it shows FTA how we will keep our transit agency safe, how we'll encourage our frontline workers to explain some safety hazards on the road that they see every day. And also gives us an opportunity to mitigate some risks that we see, report some near misses. All the accidents will be investigated and reported. So it's one of the first things that FTA has done in regards to safety and keeping that data. In the past, we haven't had to do this. This is something new in 2020. And since the bipartisan infrastructure law, they've encouraged and implemented the frontline workers have to be part of it as well. So this policy doesn't get written without them looking at it and understanding it and agreeing with it, to be honest. So if they have any comments, we're able to put that in there. It's a way for them to yeah, just be part of the safety plan for within our agency.
Any questions on the plan? Council Sprague?
All right, this is, I think, really a step up in terms of the content of the plan. And there are a lot of, looks like there are a lot of really positive changes there. Not that the community connector hasn't been safety conscious before, but this just really indicates a lot of work that you have done in the safety officer to bring this to completion, but also what you'll be doing in the future. And I would hope that the city could maybe figure out a way to promote it while saying, we've always been concerned about safety, but look at us now. Because I think where this is an improvement that we ought to tell the public that we're in the process of making, because it's a lot of very good progress.
Thank you.
So thank you.
A motion to approve the plan?
So moved. Second.
Second, without any objection. Approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item.
Yes, just so folks know, there will be an order related to that item on the next council agenda. Yeah, so this last item is a discussion request, if you will, related to the policy direction for the use of certain city property, things like flags, honorary street names, illumination of city hall, public parks, things of that nature. And city solicitor Dave Sebchuk is joining me. We have a small committee of internal staff that have been working to craft this policy. And we kind of hit a point where before we bring draft language before the council, we kind of wanted to get a sense of the direction that the council would like the policy to go in. I'm going to give an overview, won't go too detailed into the legal. That's what he's for if he needs to. So ultimately it is, it boils down to, with regard to all these items, you know, temporary displays in parks, the flags, street names, logo, illumination of city hall. It is whether or not, or it is recommended that there be a designation related to all of those items of either government use or speech and public speech. Because there's a big difference there in terms of how they're treated and who gets to decide what. And so essentially, if something is designated a public forum, that is free expression by the public. And generally, if you allow it that way, you can't pick and choose, if you will, what is allowed. If it's government speech, that's, you know, the government, you as a body, basically saying that this is not for the public use, but for government only. And so there's more restrictions, if you will. So that's kind of a high level overview, and I'll step aside just real quick and then we can return to it if you'd like further explanation. But the other question too is like how, if you as a body decide that you would like to go one way over the other, the question becomes, is that true of all these different areas, or would you like to consider something like Pierce Park being considered a public forum, so there can be a regulated sort of conditions for use of that park, where they have to go through a permitting process, but generally folks can, you know, have a temporary display of any kind, for example, versus like maybe flags you only want for government use. So this is an all or nothing. And that's kind of why we don't have a draft policy yet. We wanted to better understand kind of the thoughts from council so that we can come back at a future meeting with proposed language.
5 or 6 years ago, there was a request by a local group for a menorah display, and we changed some language. I think it was Norm Vega Park and Pierce
Pierce,
Park. I think
yes.
Both of those we designated as places with.
So that's a
They're
great
separate from
point.
this or part of this?
That is a great point. So that, I believe that there's an existing policy related to holiday displays.
Holiday.
This policy is meant to kind of capture all of those policies and so into one, and those other ones would go away. So for example, there's another policy around statues and monuments. Right now, the policy is nothing is allowed we get requests, for example, for Paul Bunyan all the time, but he's very fragile, so we wouldn't ever want to put him in a compromising place structurally. But this would incorporate that policy so that all those accessory ones go away and there's just one that is easily posted for the public's use instead of sorting through multiple.
Counselor Davin?
Thank you. I think this is great because I know, when we've gone through it before with other requests and things, I'm not on the committee, but I would be interested in it being broken out into, because like, to me, how you use the park is very different than whether we're flying a banner for Pride. And so with that, I guess my question would be, because we went through that whole thing with banners versus flag uses and what speech was controlled in that way, because then there's I think it's banners that maybe Downtown Bangor Partnership also hangs, or if those are
Yeah.
flag, like, so all of those pieces. But I guess my question with that would be just thinking of the Progress Pride banners that we do. Would that fall under city speech or government speech under this? Because I know it was initially, like, I think it was Heel who had brought it to us. So like, I'm just wondering, like, just as an example of like, what would it mean to say that all banner usage is only government speech versus allowing it broader?
I'm gonna let.
I feel like that's a big
So-
question.
What we would like to get direction on is, and it's my suggestion that, that when we're talking about use of certain property, whether we designate it, that we should either be clear that we're designated as government speech or whether we're designated as free speech. If we're designated as a public forum where there's going to be free speech, then we can have time, place, and manner restrictions on that speech, but not viewpoint restrictions. So if, on the other hand, we're designating this as government speech, then the council would control what is being said there. And there's another part of the First Amendment of the United States. It's not, there's one part that says Congress shouldn't pass any law abridging the freedom of speech, but it also says that Congress shouldn't pass any law respecting an establishment of religion. It's called the Establishment Clause. And those two clauses have tension with each other. And the city of Boston got in trouble. And there's a Supreme Court case from 2022, Shurtleff versus the city of Boston, where they thought they were worried about the Establishment Clause when an organization wanted to fly what they called the Christian flag, and they denied it. But the problem was that they had a long history of allowing all kinds of speech at that particular location, and the only time that they denied anybody was when they denied the Christian flag. So they were worried about the Establishment Clause when they should have been worried about violating the other clause, the free speech clause of the First Amendment. So that's why it is suggested that I'm going to suggest that with respect to each of these places, these areas that we designate in the written policy, which ones that we're going to be government speech and which ones are going to be public forum. And so there are other cities that have been clear in their written policies regarding flag poles, and they've designated those as government speech. And so the city council would be making the decision on if they're going to try to fly a commemorative flag. It would be something that the city would be doing. Other areas, like perhaps the temporary displays in Pierce Park, that could potentially be something that would be public speech, that would be not government speech, but public speech, in which you would need to then not put any viewpoint restrictions on that. But you have to remember, if you open up an area for public speech, you can't pick and choose which ones you're going to allow to have their free speech in that location.
Counselor Davin?
Yeah, so to follow up on that, it was kind of in my specific questioning on when we're talking about the banners and government versus free speech, for example, again, the Progress Pride banners. Initially, the reason that we did those is because it was brought to us by a NATSO organization. And part of why we, to my understanding, had to make it like a banner versus flag policy was exactly these reasons. But since it's something that came to us rather than us as a council being like, hey, we should do, and then we allowed it, which, like, where would that fall? Like, say, because then,
If you have a process where you have the public and certain groups in the public wanting to apply for a permit to put up a banner, then that sounds like it's gonna be something that's a public speech.
Right.
If you have, on the other hand, the city council saying, we're going to recognize, a particular, we're gonna fly a particular country's flag on this flagpole for this day, then that could potentially be government speech. You can designate things the way you want, but my suggestion is that we just be clear in how we're designating each.
absolutely, no, having dealt with this at the library, I guess,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilor.
Go ahead.
I would just say, like, I guess, there's sort of a retroactive situation in that case, or in other, like, I would support, like, all of our public parks staying in a category where they can be free speech, as we have now. And I'm sorry to keep harping on the banner thing, but I know that how we delineated that was a big issue. And so say we all agree that banners and flags are governmental speech only. Going forward, we have these banners that came to us from a public ask. Is us continuing to hang them somehow, would that be violating government speech, or does it become government speech because we've decided to continue doing it as a government? Does that make sense as a question? Okay.
Yeah, I think you're asking what the definition of the government piece is, right?
I mean, I don't think so.
Like what makes something government use or speech?
No, I think I understand that. That's why I keep going back to the flag, or even the downtown Bangor partnership. Those are things that came to us from a public group. So because those were used as free speech forums, and so therefore we couldn't necessarily turn things down. But I think Councilor Sprague had brought it up back when we had the banner versus flag discussion, that we were able to allow banners to be something like brought to us like that, where the council had more control over what went on them versus other, like, flying flags. I don't remember quite the cut down on that, but what I'm saying is, if we go forward saying that hanging a banner like we do any of those pieces like Arttober, those aren't all city things. We've been doing them. If we changed our definition of, or what our ordinance is, will that mean that if we say it's governmental only, going forward, we'd be able to hang DUP or Pride, since those aren't necessarily coming to us. They came from outside the organization and we said, yes.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know how else to say that. And I feel like
If we're gonna put together a new written policy, it would be perspective looking, and I'm kind of hesitant to get into, situations in the past where was this free speech or was this government speech, that might be a difficult thing depending on the circumstances of each time when things were allowed or when expression was made. But if we're going to put this all together into one written policy, it would be perspective looking. In other words, from this point forward, this is how we're going to do it.
Council Pelletier?
Thank you. My 2 cents, I would like to see that flagpoles and the naming of honorary streets be government speech. I do tend to lean toward public parks continuing to be free speech. My concern about that is, what are the limitations that we can place on hate speech, given that we're seeing a rise in that we saw that at our own city council meeting, people popping up out of the woodwork to say all manner of things that don't need to be said.
All right. Well, if you have something designated as government speech, a non-public forum, then you can eliminate that completely in those areas. If you have an area that is designated as a public forum for free speech, then you have restrictions that the government would have on that free speech. If you're going to allow one group to say something, then you likely would also have to allow that by another group. And so viewpoint restrictions are dealt with by way of what they call strict scrutiny by the courts, and anything that's judged under the strict scrutiny standard generally gets struck down. So, if you are looking at something and you say, I don't want to allow this based on the content or the viewpoint, that's going to be a problem restricting it if it's a public forum. I'm not saying that all speech would have to be allowed in that public forum, but you'd have to, basically, generally what you're allowed to restrict are time, place, and manner of the speech, and not the viewpoint of the speech or the content.
Which originally, because of that, like the holiday piece and stuff was restricted to one area. You know, it's also logistically easier for Parks and Rec to keep track of that, make sure trash, like gatherings, all that stuff isn't happening like all over. So I'll have to talk more with Tracy Willett, Parks and Rec Director, about opening that up broader than one park. It could be something that maybe we start with a smaller designation and see how it goes, sort of a thing. But we'll ask that question and come back later with more information.
And this use is, it sounds like it's more of an organized use of city property, so we could have a application process and a fee associated with it. Is that true? Or-
For the permitting process,
Yeah,
of,
but-
I believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
this isn't like somebody just showing up in a.
Right, you'd set up an
Getting up on a
application
soapbox and talk.
There's a
process in the
You
policy.
just can't deny it based on the
Right,
viewpoint because
right.
you don't like whatever it is they want
Right,
to
so
do.
it's more of an
If it's,
organized.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Would you want to do that?
I would just be being a dead horse, no, right?
Council Pelletier?
And this is slightly off this subject, but on the subject of hate speech at city council meetings. I know I've been contacted by other counselors from other areas in Maine who are thinking about ways that they can eliminate and prevent that from happening. And one of the things that they're thinking about is either restricting public comment to being in person only, or requiring that people sign up with their name and actual address to be able to participate in commentary on Zoom. So I don't know what's legal and what's not. I certainly think we need to err on the side of more speech and not less. However, it would be great for us to be able to think about, as a council, what are ways in which we can also protect this space as a space that is welcoming and serving to all people. So I'd be interested to hear at a future meeting, what are the options that we might have available
For meetings specifically.
for meetings specifically.
So what do you need specifically for some direction? I don't think we've given you any good direction yet. What do you need for direction? yet?
Well,
What do you think?
people have talked about 6 different categories, and if we could kind of get sort of a directive with respect to the categories
Okay.
as to where the council thinks that we ought to be heading in the direction of, then we could maybe put together a draft that might follow your directives rather than just trying to guess whether you
Yeah.
want something to be
So what do
public
you-
forum.
What do we
For
got?
example, it seems like one of the easier ones are the flag poles. And I'm not talking about in Pierce Park, I'm talking about the flag poles, for example.
Like the one down here. for
Yeah,
example.
on the
waterfront. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, because in 2021, on St. Patrick's Day, we flew the Irish flag and that became controversial about flying
Right.
the Irish flag in St. Patrick's. Day.
you could
Right. We didn't take
perhaps-
the US flag, yeah.
in cities that have made their flag raising policy a matter of public government speech and not public forum, they have allowed potentially commemorative flags to be flown, but they've limited what are permissible flags, and that's as a matter of government policy, and it's the government that
I think
decides
everybody
what's
thinks, I think it
going
would be
on.
good to have some type of
Yeah,
policy regarding that, so.
yeah,
Because it would, there was no direction, we didn't have any direction last time. We did.
yeah, so it would, be, if that's one category that
I
you
think
could
if
kind of give us a
everybody agreed,
directive
that
on
makes sense
tonight,
to have
that would be an
and I
easy
think
one, I think.
Government speech makes sense to me, the flag poles, any objection to that one? Okay,
Honorary street name. Or naming, I should say.
obviously, jump in if you just, I think that obviously has to be government speech, we can't have everybody decide to honorarily name a street that they want, but so.
Okay.
That seems.
But we can determine, it still can come to us as a request and we'll determine whether or not we want to honorarily name it.
Well, you can, but it would still be the city
It's still-
council making the
Right,
decision.
yeah, that's how,
It- it-
because that's what we
I
did this year,
wouldn't
yeah,
suggest opening up a street, if you want street designations to be government speech.
right.
I would prefer that we not have a big policy that
Right.
says anybody can come in and
Right.
request
But I
anything.
think, in my opinion, on this, I think part of it should be that it's a temporary thing, because we don't have any. There's no policy in place now on street naming, honorary street naming. So I think it should be clear that it's a temporary thing and where it can be allowed. I don't think we should.
But temporary doesn't necessarily distinguish whether it's government speech or public forum. Either
Oh,
one of
no,
them
I'm
could be
not saying the
temporary.
type, it's still
Yeah.
government speech. I'm just saying as part of that policy, is this a place to put the other conditions in? Or is that someplace else?
I think having a process is always good. I think the slippery slope would be is if, various counselors start bringing forward requests from outside groups and you're saying yes and no, and at what point does that cross the line over into public?
Right.
So there would need to be, I think some level of understanding that generally this is how it's gonna
Mhm.
be sort of a thing. Doesn't mean there won't be exceptions
Mhm.
as a solicitor subject mentioned, but yeah. So I think that's just kind of at the
Mhm.
heart of what we're just chatting about.
Okay.
So probably city logo, also government speech. And statues and monuments, maybe still no, because we don't want to risk their safety. And then the question becomes, I think I heard collective, like temporary displays at Pierce Park, probably public speech. Are we generally okay with that? This is obviously just a consensus. We'll bring back a formal policy for consideration. And the last one is the illumination of City Hall. Which is in theory just color, regardless of what colors they represent. But again, you couldn't say no if somebody wanted, I don't know, red. Or I'm thinking like blood red during Halloween or something. But it's up to you guys. What the initial thought is on that.
Up to that.
So, so in this case, like right now, we turn it purple for like pancreatic cancer. I think. That comes to us from an outside organization's request. In the future, say we make it governmental only. Not like if I'm like, I've lost people to pancreatic cancer. I think it would be great if we made it purple. I'm part of the government. Does that fall under governmental
The
request?
government would,
Assuming there was a majority.
well, the council would vote
Right,
on whether the city wants to make that statement.
right. Well, and that's what I'm
Not-
saying is.
not
It
the
could still
public.
come to us from a private group and still be
Yeah.
government speech. We would make the
Well,
decision.
that's,
You're right.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, but then
Yeah.
that's the whole.
It's one,
Slippery slope piece.
in one place you're permitting
Right,
speech, in the
yeah.
other place you are the speech, you're creating the speech.
But it doesn't matter who makes, where the request comes from, right? It's who makes the decision on what,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Council Pelletier.
So my thought on the lighting of City Hall is that City Hall is absolutely inextricable from city government.
Mhm.
It is, our building is an expression of our values as a city, and I would want there to be some council oversight into what colors we use to represent City Hall. I think that makes sense. So I would lean toward government speech on that.
I just want to follow up on one thing that Courtney mentioned. She mentioned Pierce Park specifically about the public forum. But then I heard also a lot of conversation. She did indicate she'd be following up with Tracy Willett. As public forums in all of our parks, there are a number of parks where we have a lot of recreational and younger persons activities. And understand that perhaps not all public forums are, it may not always be appropriate depending on the public forum to allow it to coexist with younger children. So I just wanted to, I'm sure that would be something Tracy would have come back with.
Yeah,
but I
we'll
think
have
that's a,
a recommendation for sure on that. On future meeting. Great, I think.
That's great.
I'm just a little unclear whether you're differentiating between free speech and public speech in all parks, or whether you're suggesting that we move toward designating some parks as areas for public speech. And can we do that? Can we set aside, say, here's two different places where we promote public speech, but everywhere else, no. I mean,
Yes, so my understanding
can't
is,
do that.
yes, you can do that. And I believe, and again, I'd want to double check with Parks and Rec Director. I believe at least to start, our recommendation would be to limit the public speech to one park, if not two, potentially, with a process that people have to go through. Because again, you can ask that to ensure, that there's a time limit on it, that, they're abiding by certain rules, but that applies to everybody, and you couldn't say no based off the viewpoint sort of a thing. But yes, it would be limited to a park most likely.
So I have a question,
Yeah.
please. So sometimes we have those events for people in recovery or addressing mental health, and it's used as public area to speak, and
Like an event
An
permit?
event permit.
so
Yeah, I think that's different.
There's an event policy that we
Right.
already have.
Yeah.
that
Okay.
It involves a permit, and
so
that one,
that
I
doesn't
mean,
fall under.
right
this,
now, if somebody came forward and wanted to do an event for an organization that the council may or may not approve of, you can't say no, so long as they follow the policy
Okay,
to get that permit.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
I'm not sure how to express this right, but I don't think all public speech should have to be permitted. I think there's merit in somebody being able to put their soapbox down, stand up on it, and make public comment without that being restricted by having to have a permit process to do
If they can,
that.
anybody can still go in a park and go off.
that's right.
This is- these are
Not all
organized
public speech
events,
is
yeah.
permitted, nor would
All right.
we intend for that to be the case.
Then I think
Yeah.
we want to be clear on what the levels of restriction.
What we're talking about here is using certain government properties and the policy that we would put together for use of certain public property. That it
Like
would
put things
certainly,
like temporary displays, for
Yeah.
example, if they are organizing a group of people, and I'm sure that the event policy talks about what that would mean. Like if you and three of your folks came into a public park, I wouldn't consider that an event, for example, but if you brought 50 people, that might be a little different. So there's definitely different levels, I think, to what's regulated. But we'll double check some of that for more information.
All right, you good?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right,
Okay,
thanks.
that wraps up this meeting. Thank you very much.
Are you missing a pen?
Bye.
Okay,
I
thank you.
see a pen cap and it looks a lot like.
Yes, it does.
We're adjourned, Cody.